Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Tarrant County Five Stones Task Force. If you haven't gotten food, please go ahead and get your food. This is back to school season. In case you haven't noticed, we have some elementary school kids that like to design our lunch bag. We want to say thank you to Catering to Love for providing the food today. Okay, I have a very serious announcement. After 26 years in Texas, I'm officially a Texan. I got my first Paracon review. Okay. If you are new to Five Stones, please fill out this QR code. This helps us keep track of who's here. This also gives you a chance to be added to our email list if you so desire. And then you can get email reminders of our upcoming meetings. As a note, if you are a Tarrant County employee, for some reason, you are not going to receive the Five Stones emails because they do not like the email service that I use. So if you are a Tarrant County employee, you're going to have to use something other than your Tarrant County official email if you want to receive the Five Stones emails. So this month, our spotlight agency is Real Options, and I'm going to have them come to the front and tell us a little bit about their mission.
Okay, I'm short, so I'm standing in for Crystal Carl, so hopefully you guys can be graceful with me, clap, say some laughs every once in a while. So basically oops, I'm sorry. See, I'm already messing up. Thank you. So I'm with Real Options. I'm the case management coordinator at Real Options. And I'm not sure if you guys know this, but there's very few case manager coordinators in the pregnancy world. And when I say pregnancy world, I say pregnancy clinic, and most of us think, oh, you're just bringing in women to pee on a stick, but that's not exactly what we do at all. We do so much more. So we exist to glorify God by valuing life, and then we share truth and we restore hope. So the multiple locations that we have are in Melissa, and now we're going to be in the Dream Center that is located in Oak Cliff, as well as we have a mobile unit that goes out to Carrollton and will go out to another location. The satellite office is located in Allen, Texas. So from here, from Fort Worth, that's probably a 37-minute drive to the Dream Center. So that would be very helpful for you guys to know in Tarrant County, because most women that are stepping into our clinic, some of them are being human trafficked. Some of them are domestic violence. Some women are just in distress and they need a place to get away. And sometimes that's not within their surrounding areas. So again, we are a pregnancy center, but we're much, much more. Oh, I did it again. Sorry, I keep putting it down on that. So we have multiple services beyond the pregnancy world. We are actually have a fatherhood program that goes into the jails and talks to fathers. We like to capture them there because, not all these men are making great decisions. So we want to stop them in their tracks, but we also offer fatherhood workshops outside of the clinic as well. Not only that, but we also do post-abortive care. So I'm not sure if you guys know, but 85% of human traffic victims are forced into having an abortion. That's not by choice. They're being forced. So we like to present to them post-abortive care. We provide an environment for them to heal. And so that way that they can have value within inside themselves and see that they are loved and cared for. So that's one of the major services that we offer within inside our pregnancy clinic. Not only that, there's more. Sometimes we have agencies that are calling us and they are asking for services for the victims of human trafficking. So we work with, let's see, Reclaim, by the way, 611, Carrie Toronto, she's actually on staff. So the wonderful thing about that is she gets to train us. And we're able to train our staff to be trauma aware. So when the women come in, we can catch them. We can catch their traffickers right in the center of trying to have them have an abortion of some sort, which there's many stories that we've had. We've actually served over 50 women that have been human trafficked within our centers and have captured them, been able to assist them with maybe baby items. Sometimes it's also STD checks. So Carrie is able to do a full panel with them and walk with them through that. At the Dream Center, we're actually partnered with Rescue Her, so that's going to be great. And we also have Traffic 911 that sometimes gives us a call. And we try to pour out our overflow on them if possible. So our heart is really to serve the women that are coming in. We want to see them as individuals that are needing help in any aspect. The great portion of my job is to be able to connect them to these agencies. So if you see me and hear me trying to give you a call or say, hey, I want to stop in, I want to walk it with you and see how the intake process goes. It's because we really care about our clients that are walking through our doors. We want to make sure that they're cared for when we hand them in the hand. They've already been through so much trauma. So I might be the trusting face for them and I need to put them in a trusting hand. So we walk through it with them. So again, also we have the 180 team that goes into schools. Our 180 abstinence team talks to children about the dangers of social media. Because I don't know if you guys know, I'm pretty sure you do, some of you guys do, is that some of those games are luring women and young girls into human trafficking scenarios. But that's not just media. I mean, that's also for an adult. Well, let's think about LinkedIn. That's a #1 pub as well, where a woman could go in and think that she is getting a job promotion or getting a great job, but instead she suckered into something else. So we try to provide all this education towards everyone that comes through our doors and provide support as much as possible. And that also means domestic violence. Sometimes we have to walk it through with them and make sure that before they leave our center, that they are safe, they have a place to go. And so I might be the one, or someone else might be the one calling from that agency. And when they call from that agency, you want someone to pick up and say, hey, there's a bed available. Yes, we're able to see them. We don't want them just to say, hey, just have them fill out an intake sheet, because guess what? We're the trusting face. We need to be able to put them in the hands safe. So I hope you guys can go ahead and scan the QR code if possible and hear a little bit more about us. And we'd love to give you a tour if you're interested. And we would just love to have you on board if you're interested in volunteering as well. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. I know my misbehaving clicker was a bit of a distraction, so if you have other questions, please feel free to visit her in the back, either after the meeting or at some point. It is that time of year. This is your last chance to submit a nomination for somebody that you know. Please pull out your phone, take a picture of this slide. You can later use Google Lens to follow that QR code. But think for a moment of somebody you know who is doing this work. Anybody that is in this field who is doing this work probably deserves a nomination, because this is hard work. hiring work. For those of you that want to get involved, we have 2 opportunities to help a survivor. First one, we're doing our annual Amazon gift card collection. So every Christmas, we collect $25 gift cards. This is something where we collect these gift cards and give them to direct service providers who give them to survivors and their families about Christmas time. So they're able to use them for their own needs or their family needs, sort of as a Christmas time gift. So there's a QR code for that. The second one is a little special to me. This is somebody that I know. It's a survivor leader. This one's a little triggering, so don't follow this link if you feel like you might be triggered by it, but it is an end of life situation for a survivor leader. But if you want to help somebody who is at the end of life, we are collecting for a funeral cost for someone. And that is the QR code for that. All right. 5 Stones has some changes that are coming. First of all, I would like to welcome Carrie Grace. Please come to the front for a moment. Carrie is going to be Felicia number 2. So you're going to see her up front. She's going to be helping me with a lot of the 5 Stones leadership. You will be seeing her sending out emails. She's going to help me with vision casting over the next year or so. We are going to be planning out 5 Stones growth for the next 5 to 10 years. And she's going to be a big part of this. So please welcome her to the next future.
Thank you. I love what Felicia has birthed because she really carried something that she brought to life. And all of you have come along because of this woman and what she was relentless in getting this going. And it's such a beautiful, collaborative community. I love 5 Stones, and I'm excited because I feel like whenever we are just intentional to take the time to cast vision, what we have is good, but we want to go to great. And that's really where we're headed. So I hope that you are ready to just kind of go on this journey with us. And I hope that it's going to infuse every single one of you, whether you are a nonprofit, a church, if you're part of law enforcement. Our goal is to create something that truly is supportive in hopefully a whole new level, but also just continue to make a bigger impact in our community. This is a beautiful model. It's healthy, and it has really created something powerful in Tarrant County. And we just want to continue to grow what's already been an amazing impact in our community.
All right, some other changes. We felt like we were crunching our speakers a little bit. We were pushing our time, so we decided to add an extra 15 minutes to our meeting. So our meetings are now going to go to 12:15. If you need to leave at noon, we totally understand. This was originally created to be a lunch meeting, and some of you have to work. So if you need to leave at noon and we see you skittling towards the door, we totally get it. No shame. But for those of you that have the time and would like to stay the extra 15 minutes, it's mainly created for Q&A. So most of our presenters will probably end about noon with their presentation, but the extra 15 minutes is there mainly for Q&A. All right, law enforcement updates. They're now going to, this is also to give time, extra time for our speakers. They're now going to be on a rotating basis. So Fort Worth PD will give an update 1 month. Tarrant County Sheriff's Office will give an update the next month. This is also gonna open it up in case other law enforcement agencies want to join. So that we can open it up so that we can have more participation from more law enforcement agencies. For partner agency announcements, again, in the interest of time, we're now going to send those out in the after action email. So if you're a partner agency and you have announcements, please email those to me and I'll get those out after the meeting is over and we send that after action email out. We'll make sure to include all those announcements. All right, part of our vision casting. This is a chance for you to be part of Five Stone's future. We're asking everybody to fill out this survey. This is a chance for you to give feedback on how you feel about Five Stones. There are about 9 really quick star, 1 to 5 stars questions. And then there's several more questions which are open-ended. I ask you to please take a few minutes to fill out the survey. This will give us an idea of what we're doing good and what we can improve upon. This is going to shape where we go with Five Stones as we move forward. This little QR code is on your agenda and it's also going to go out in the email afterwards. All right. We're now going to hear from law enforcement and we will have Fort Worth PD and Detective Orand.
Good afternoon. So last month we had 6 cases and 3 tips. And but what I want to talk about, we had a lot of training last month or in September. We had a 2-day human trafficking training from the Human Trafficking Training Center. Day 1 was on interdiction, transitioning from routine call to a trafficking incident, properly obtaining evidence, interviewing victims and suspects, and then understanding PTSD, trauma bonding, and why victims don't disclose. Our day 2 was on special victims methodology, and that one we learned how to talk to trafficking victims, as well as had quite a few scenarios all day. The officers who were there, putting them in different scenarios. It was a really great class. And the end of this month, we're actually they're presenting this class again in Dallas, but they're adding a 3rd day on there dealing with the closing of illicit massage businesses. And so they didn't have that when they came here. So we're going to be going to Dallas for that 3rd day of the training for that part of the class. But while we had the training here, our sergeant and 2 detectives went down to Florida. I had to stay here in Fort Worth. They get to go to Florida. And they went to a human trafficking training down in Florida for about 4 days, and then had another training in Dallas. So there's been a lot of training going on, which has been great for our unit. I think that's really the first time in 4 years that it's really been this extensive. So working on quite a few cases, the 6 that came in, as well as what we already have outstanding. But one I want to kind of touch on that actually just happened yesterday. An officer, one of our school resources officers, called me. I got a call out yesterday, and he said that an Uber driver stopped him because he had just picked up a female from DFW. And he said, he goes, it's a pretty long ride. He goes, I'm just trying to carry on a conversation with her, asking her where she's going, where she's from. She flew in from Nashville. And he said that I spoke to the Uber driver. He said she didn't have any luggage with her. She just flew in. He picked her up, took her to a residence. It was actually in River Oaks. And he said when he was pulling up to the house that she's just crying, just uncontrollably, and can't stop. And so he told her, he said, you don't have to get out of the car. I will take you somewhere else. Where do you need to go? Is there somebody I can call for you? And she just, she wouldn't speak to him. So she ends up getting out of the car at this house. There's a man who's standing outside waiting for her. He said she goes in, but he was just so uncomfortable leaving her there. Because he just knew something wasn't right about leaving her at this call. And he said at this time, he said he's already done like 1,000 Uber rides and he's never had a situation like this. So he called Uber to make a general report with them to let them know the situation. Felicia and I were talking about it this morning because I was gonna call River Oaks, so I did. Called them this morning. They had already gotten a call yesterday, had already done a welfare check on the or on the girl, have some information on her. She told them that she was just upset because this was her boyfriend and he wouldn't come pick her up at the airport. So they were gonna go back. They went this morning to talk to her again. No one was at the home. They're gonna go out there this afternoon. But just that Uber driver had the sense enough about him to know that something wasn't right. And maybe it was, maybe she was upset because her boyfriend didn't come pick her up at the airport. But he just knew that he just felt very uncomfortable leaving her at this house. No luggage. She wouldn't speak to him. She was just crying uncontrollably. But we have the information of who ordered the Uber. We know where he lives. So we have all of that, or River Oaks has that information. But just, saying that is just, this is a collaborative effort. It takes all of us. It's not just law enforcement or our advocate, our DAs, it's Uber, it's Lyft, it's, the DoorDash, like it takes all of us because all of us are going to see different signs and recognize different things. And just knowing that he, called Uber because he saw the police officer talk to him, but then also called, Uber to make the report because he just knew something wasn't right. So so hopefully it was just she's upset with her boyfriend, but I hope that that's all it is. But if it's not, at least we have a start of where to start an investigation and help River Oaks if they need it. So thank y'all.
All right. A Fort Worth native and TCU political science grad, Ty Bowden hasn't had to go very far to pursue his passions. After starting volunteer work with the NET in 2013 while at TCU, Ty is now the assistant director where he oversees the MASE program and keeps things running smoothly behind the scenes. Ty is passionate about bringing men to the fight for justice in Fort Worth and across the country. A leader in the demand disruption movement in Texas, Ty has trained hundreds of men to engage and disrupt potential sex buyers over the last several years, as well as personally interacted with thousands of buyers. When he's not at his desk or leading a training, Ty is either cheering on the horned frogs or chasing wild turkeys or drinking a glass of wine and reading a book on his Fairmount front porch, accompanied by his wife, Sarah, sons Shepard and Sage, and their dog, Camp. Ty is also a deacon of city engagement at the Paradox Church. Please welcome Ty Bowden.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I've done this presentation a few times, and so I'm hopeful to bring some new information today, some updated work that MASE is doing here in Fort Worth, Tarrant County. And so, like Felicia said, I'm the associate director at the NET, and I have overseen our MASE program, which stands for Men Against Sexual Exploitation, for the last 10 years now. So we've been doing demand reduction work here in Fort Worth since 2015. And so I'm just going to briefly share a little bit about the NET as a whole, and then we'll really focus in on MASE and what we're doing. So at the NET, we disrupt trafficking at the source and support survivors because we believe everyone is worthy of the chance to rebuild their lives. And so actually, the majority of our time, energy, effort, and resources go into serving adult female survivors of trafficking. Abby is our clinical director back here, so if you want to learn more, grab her before you leave today. But everything that we've done over the last, we were founded in 2012, so the last 13 and a half years has been fighting for a world where girls are not for sale. And so these are 3 programs that we have. So Purchased is our aftercare and outreach advocacy and enrichment for survivors. So we have we do jail outreach, we have a survivor support group, we have case management, we have an enrichment program that has life skills classes and all sorts of things. So if you have questions about how to get involved with that, Abby is a great resource for that. We also have a nonprofit social enterprise that provides job training, employment, and pays a living wage to survivors. It's called the Worthy Co. The store is in the shops at Clear Fork. They sell candles and jewelry that the ladies make, so you should stop by there. It's almost Christmas time, so go there. If you're going to Christmas in Cowtown, I know that's coming up in a couple of weeks. We will have a booth there. So they're obviously doing really great work since 2018. And then MASE, which stands for Men Against Sexual Exploitation, and so that's what I'm gonna focus on today. And so really, the reason that we have our MASE program is early on in this work, we realized that Abby and the purchase team could do really fantastic work serving survivors, providing care, helping them rebuild their lives. But unless we got upstream and went after this at the root, they would always have a job. And so MASE is our goal to really get upstream and disrupt the demand for commercial sex. Because simply put, if there were no buyers, there would be no business. And so if we can meaningfully reduce the demand for commercial sex, then we will meaningfully reduce the number of women who are exploited. And so that is our focus with MASE. I think an example we use a lot is if you think about a trafficking, interaction, transaction, most of us are first going to think about the victims, which is correct. We should focus the majority of our energy there. And then we're going to think about the traffickers, and we're going to think about our law enforcement partners who are going after them. And those things are both great and necessary, but we forget about this third kind of corner of the triangle that is actually propping the entire thing up. And that is the men who are willing to pay other people to exploit them. And so if we can get rid of that, which is by far the largest number of people, so if we can reduce that, then we're going to have a meaningful impact on those other two things. And so we really focus on two things through MASE. We do direct buyer engagement, which I'll talk about, and then community education, because we know that we both have to address the men who are actively participating in this, but we also have to change our culture so that we create fewer of those men in the future. And so those are our two focus areas. And we really don't just want all of these guys to get arrested. Sheriff's office is obviously doing a really great job doing that, but Commander Turner will be the first one to tell you that we don't have enough jail cells to fill, for all of these guys. And so we have to change the culture in Fort Worth, where men do not use their power and resources to exploit vulnerable people. And so that's really the vision behind MASE and kind of drives everything that we do. And so we're going to talk, if you've seen the roots of demand presentation I've done before, I talk a lot about the research that we have on buyers, kind of their motivations, where they're coming from. But I want to take you a little bit more kind of linearly on a journey of how a buyer gets to this place, and then when they have done that, where we as MASE can come in. And so I think this is from Joe Madison, Demand Disruption outside of Houston. He just talks about this so well, and so I'm just using his information, and instead of taking this and putting it in my own slide, I'm just going to show you exactly what he talks about. And his comment that he said here is that a buyer is not a 2025 buyer is not just a 2025 problem, it's also a 2015 problem. It's a 2010 problem. And so I think this escalation timeline exploitation timeline really highlights that really well. So I know it's not huge, so I'll read it for you. But at 9 years old, you have your first exposure to pornography for both, a future buyer and a future victim, right? So there's these kind of mirroring timelines for someone who's eventually going to exploit through purchasing and someone who's eventually going to be exploited. And then you have smartphone, so we know all about current online exploitation and sextortion and things like that. But when you get your first smartphone, for many of these boys, that's when kind of immersion in pornography really takes over. Sexting and sextortion, and then you're getting into the age of generally the first exploitation. You can see there, freshman men first visit a strip club at 18 once they can get in the door. Other aspects of vulnerability, and then the average age of purchase, our best estimate here in the US, is at 21 and a half years old. And so from that first purchase, just like we say that no girl wakes up one day and says, hey, I can't wait to sell myself when I grow up. No young boy wakes up at 9 years old and says, I can't wait to participate in commercial sexual exploitation. Can't wait to buy another human being, right? And I think that's something that in general, we often miss in this conversation, is that we need to be addressing these men, we need to be arresting them, and that's true. But if we're just doing that at that 21 and a half, or, I'll show some stats of guys that we've interacted with, 22 to 70 something. If we're not doing that when they're 9, 10, 11 years old, we've already kind of missed the boat. And so it's really important that we are getting ahead of this from a cultural perspective. And you can see the escalation dynamic. Again, no boy just all of a sudden goes from, never having been exposed to any of this, not having any sort of background or history with any of this, to all of a sudden Googling, escort ads in Fort Worth. And so this escalation dynamic, I think, is a really clear picture of how, a man somehow gets into that hotel room at some point. And also, shows clearly that pornography is the driving factor in leading men to purchase sex. It is the number one cultural influence on our society that has created, tens of thousands of buyers here in Fort Worth alone. And so you can clearly see, from softcore porn to, well, this isn't really doing it for me. So now you have webcams and OnlyFans and things like that, where it's more personal and back and forth. And then you have, well, the over the screen thing isn't doing it for me, so I'll go to a strip club. And, again, law enforcement can tell you that there's trafficking happening in every strip club in Fort Worth. And then eventually you're going to cross those thresholds into, well, again, this isn't working for me, and I still have this pornography addiction, and my wife or my girlfriend, isn't willing to engage in these desires that I have because of what I'm seeing online, or I'm not even going to ask because I know that they're across the line. Carrie talked a lot about that last time. And so then it moves into, well, I have to go out and purchase this, because once I pay someone, I've purchased their consent and they can't tell me no anymore. And so to enact these things that I've seen on the screen or seeing in my head, I need to buy someone so that I'm in control of this situation. And so that is really important thing to recognize, is that when a man walks into that hotel room where, the sheriff's office is doing a demand operation, we can't just focus on, why are you here? Like, what happened in the last couple hours of your life? We have to go back to, 9 years old. And we have a lot of work to do to make sure that after they're a couple of years on probation, they're not going to go back and do that again. And so we'll talk a little bit about how we address that. A little bit more about where these guys are. And this is from 2018 report from Demand Abolition called Who Buys Sex. If you're interested in, diving deeper into that, it's a really great resource. You can Google Who Buys Sex, which, be careful, but it should be the first thing that pops up. And it's a really awesome report that has all of this information. But what we know is there's no common demographic among buyers. We see that men who make over $100,000 are more likely to purchase more often, which makes sense. But other than that, there's no kind of through line that says this person will or this person won't. 16 to 20% will pay for sex at least once in their life. So a fifth of men in the United States will do it at least once, and somewhere in that 6 to 10% range in any given year will pay for commercial sex. 25% of these guys account for 75% of transactions. So these are hardcore habitual buyers who have made it a lifestyle. They have, online forums where they're discussing this. They have review boards where they're rating their interactions with people that they purchased. Those guys are the ones that are driving the majority of this industry. And those are the guys, obviously, that the stings and things like that, the hardcore intervention is really designed for. But what that means is that 75% of men who kind of dip their toes in this water, they're not fully committed yet, right? They're reacting out of loneliness and hurt, and, well, this is just what my friends told me to do. And so that does give me hope, at least, to say that, 75% of these guys, they're not totally bought in. And you can see 64% of buyers in this study self-reported wanting to stop. They recognize that it is not in their best interest. They recognize that it's not healthy. They recognize that it's not even best for the people that they're buying. And so we enter into all of our engagements with buyers, assuming that that guy is part of the 64%. It becomes pretty clear pretty quickly if he's not, but that's really how we engage in this work. And these are some normalized beliefs that we work really hard to counteract in these engagements, because these are the things that, if we talk to a guy on the phone or in person, 99% of the time, it's very clear that he knows that what he is doing is wrong in some capacity. But what that means is that he has to lie to himself to allow himself to participate in this. And so these are the 4 things that most buyers believe about the commercial sex industry. That prostituted women enjoy the act. You know, hey, it's a job and she's here because she's making money. You know, it's a victimless crime. We're 2 consenting adults. Everything that we do is with adults. It's solicitation. It's not online solicitation of a minor or anything like that. So when we're talking to a buyer, he believed that he was engaging with another adult who was willingly doing this. And so, you know, what's the problem? Yeah, it's against the law, but it's not hurting anybody because she wants to be here. Buyers are just guys being guys. You know, hey, these are my needs. This is just what men do. I can't get it in a relationship. I'm too busy, or my wife won't do this with me anymore. And so I'm just going to go ahead and take care of my needs in a way that, you know, doesn't hurt anyone, because it's just between 2 consenting adults. And so those are things that, again, when we engage with the buyer, we're going to provide education that counters those things immediately. And so even if he doesn't believe those right away when he hears them from us, the next time he picks up that phone to, you know, call an ad or text something, there's something in, you know, in the back of his mind that he has to push through a little bit more. We're trying to create that cognitive dissonance where it's not as easy for him to do this next time, because he's heard from someone that those lies that he has told himself are not true. Some behaviors and kind of conditions that make men more likely to buy. They lack impulse control, which is significantly linked to consumption of pornography. Also trauma and neglect in their own life. And so this is not me letting these guys off the hook, or, you know, asking us to just feel bad for them, even though they're exploiting people. But the reality is the majority of men that participate in compulsive sexual behavior across the spectrum, not just sex buying, have some sort of abuse or neglect in their past, or came from a very rigid and disengaged household when they were growing up. And so a lot of times they are literally neurologically wired, where emotional intimacy is very difficult. And so it's amazing how often we'll talk to these men and we'll ask them, why are you doing this? And the first thing they say is, I'm really lonely. I don't, even if I'm married, even if I'm in a relationship, I don't connect with other people. They're not saying it maybe that directly, but I struggle to have real relationships the way that I was designed. And so we have to understand that, again, because we know that fear of punishment is not actually a big enough deterrent if we're not getting at the root of what's driving them there. And then the last thing is networking with other buyers. It's easy in the internet age today to find anything that you want pretty much online, but the majority of these men are going to be pointed there from someone who has done this before. In the old days, it was, yeah, my uncle took me to a strip club, or my dad took me to a brothel and said, this is your rite of passage now that you're 18, which are, obviously disgusting. Now it's, hey, my buddy sent me this link for this website. And, he knew that me and the wife are having a fight, and he said, hey, go blow off some steam. I know how you can do it. Or he took me to a strip club and he said, hey, I know that this girl, will do this kind of thing. And so the vast majority of them, somebody introduced them to this who was already involved in it, which means that anytime that we keep someone from doing this in the future, we're also probably keeping him from introducing to someone else. So there's a chain reaction effect there. And so briefly to pause in their journey and just share a little bit about what we do. So that's kind of everything that leads them up to purchasing sex. And again, the way that happens the majority of the time here in Fort Worth now is online. It's through escort ads. It's through these kind of known websites where someone is going to go and be able to contact someone who is ostensibly posting themselves for sex. And so, like I mentioned, we do community education because we need to make it where men aren't doing that. We're making a culture in Fort Worth where the stigma, and we've done a good job of this even since I started at the net 12 years ago. We've done a good job of taking the stigma on the people who are being forced into prostitution and putting it more towards the buyers. But we have to continue to do that where this is not even a question. Our culture rejects the idea that men have any right to purchase, other people, where victims are believed and that they're connected to resources. And so the state legislature obviously has been taking strides in that direction. We are blessed to be here in Tarrant County, where law enforcement cares a lot about that. I work with men all over the country And the vast majority of them at best have a yellow light from local law enforcement. You know, it's still very much a criminalized approach, and the penalties for purchasing, for soliciting are still so low that law enforcement just isn't able to prioritize those things. And which is, so that's really wonderful to hear in Fort Worth. We are starting to change that culture. So we do quarterly men's events. These are typically breakfasts where we'll bring in an outside speaker, have someone come talk about a specific aspect of the trafficking space. And our goal here is to help everyday men in Fort Worth. So these are 40 or 50 guys that will show up at 7 a.m. on a Thursday morning to learn about this. And the goal really obviously is to help them understand more deeply, you know, something about the anti-trafficking space. But bigger than that, it's to help them understand that you do not have to have a badge and a gun or work on staff at a nonprofit to make a difference in this. So at the very least, if they have this knowledge and they're going to talk to their, you know, somebody at work about this, and that guy, you know, maybe totally disconnected from all of this, maybe involved in this, you know, being able to start having those conversations and think differently about that, or how they raise their kids, right? You know, I think I've heard this many times over the years, is oftentimes in trafficking, the first question that we get is like, hey, how do I protect my daughters from this? And that is a good and right thing that we should want to do. But we should also be really focused on how do I raise my sons so that they don't participate in this? And so helping dads who really want to do those two things start focusing of, oh, you know how I keep my kids from engaging in risky behaviors online? Be a present, safe dad, right? And so we're not only going to keep girls safe from being exploited, but we're going to keep the boys from wandering into corners of the internet where they're going to be exposed to some things that are eventually going to lead them to maybe participate in this. So we do those quarterly men's events. We do online safety training. So we've done schools and church groups and things like that. So if you have anyone who wants that specific, you know, hey, this is a group of parents that are wanting, hey, what, you know, have all the questions. When do I give my kid a phone? How should I think about, you know, managing what they can look at online? What video games should my kids be allowed to play? If you have a group that you think would benefit from something like that, I love doing those trainings. And then we also do small groups, whether that's, you know, small group of adults who want to ask some more intentional questions, or speaking to, you know, youth groups, young men's service leagues, football teams, things like that. We have all sorts of topics where we can really dive in and help these men and boys start to think about these things differently. We also provide direct services to survivors. So the women in our program, we provide two different things. So first is our MASE Moves, where we have women who are moving out of shelters or from, you know, apartment to apartment and don't have the guys that they can call up pickup trucks to come help them move. And so we have MASE volunteers who will do that, who will show up on a Saturday morning, load up a couple pickup trucks or a U-Haul and help ladies get into a new, safer place to live. And then we do DIY clinics. So through some of our case management, we had ladies who were saying, hey, you know, I would love to learn how to do this, or you know, a big need I have is keeping my car running, but I don't know how to do that. And so we've created this little learning community. And it's really, you know, we're not bringing in experts, we're bringing in just everyday guys who have learned to do these things on their own or enjoy them. And so we create this little learning community of women in our program, MASE volunteers, we're all learning together. So we've done things like car and bike maintenance. You know, transportation can be freedom for a lot of these women. How do I get to a job? How do I get to my appointments? So car and bike maintenance. We've done gardening and lawn care, you know, home repair. How do I get my security deposit back in my apartment by spackling all those nail holes? And that has been really sweet because there are both practical outcomes to that and the moves. But the deeper purpose there is actually that these women would realize that there are healthy, safe men in the world who care about them and don't need anything from them. And so that has been one of my favorite things that we've been able to do over the last couple of years. And then our last in kind of our big focus in terms of, you know, how are we going to actually in this is our direct fire engagement. So since 2016 here in Fort Worth, we've been doing what we call cyber patrols. We partner with an organization called Epic out of Portland, who created this initiative where they post decoy ads on the internet and then engage with the men who text and call in to them. So they started back in 2013 in Portland. We met them in 2015. And then since 2016, have some numbers on here. We've done over 140 of these patrols here in Fort Worth in the last 10 years. And the point there is that we would engage with these men in a civilian to civilian, man to man way that would again cause them to think twice about what they're doing, provide them with resources. And I'll show you some examples of conversations, how that goes here in a minute. But so we do that twice a month. We have 2 teams that show up to our office over at One Safe Place in the evenings on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and engage with these guys that text and call in. And then the other thing we do is we join the sheriff's office on a lot of their demand operations. And so we're going to have the same conversation that we would have over the phone, but now we're having it with a guy, you know, who's sitting in handcuffs, is being charged with a state jail felony. And our goal in that initial interaction is really like, hey, this is about to change your life. Let's make sure that you don't end up back here. One, obviously for the people that you would potentially exploit in the future, but 2, for you and your own sake. And so we have those conversations. And then one of the things that we're able to offer them is our online buyer course that we created sometime in 2022. And then at the end of 2023, started being required as a condition of probation for some of the men who have been charged with solicitation of prostitution here in Tarrant County. And so we call it our buyer education and restoration course. Because while it is going to talk about human trafficking 101 and all the things that kind of a typical John school might have, what it's actually going to focus on is how did you get here? What do you believe? And what are some practical things that you can take away from this so that you're not going to do this again? And so we talked to them about that of ending your journey of exploitation here, and not, the first time when it became a felony in 2021, September 1, the law goes into effect. Tarrant County's arresting guys down in Mansfield. Was there, they arrested a guy literally on September 1st. He got no billed by the jury. On September 30th, they arrested the same guy in the same hotel. And so we know that threat of arrest is not a deterrent, and alone is not enough of a deterrent to keep these men from doing this. He was like, yeah, I got off. So gonna go back and do that again and get arrested by the same people that arrested me less than a month ago. And so we know that we have to go deeper than that and really get at the roots of what's driving them. And so that is something that has been really great through that course. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit more deeply. So here's some numbers. Over the last, we started our quarterly events in 2021. Had over 500 individual men from Fort Worth come to those at 17 different events. And so that's 500 men who are learning more about this and taking that back out into their church small groups, their families, their workplaces. We did 12 moves since the beginning of 2024, just helping these ladies. The majority of them are moving out of the shelter and into their own apartment, not necessarily for the first time, but for the first time since they've been in, recovery and rebuilding their lives. And so we had one lady who we moved her in and she sat down on the couch and she was trying to get up and help, and Carrie, our survivor coordinator, was like, just sit down. That's what they're here for. And she was like a princess, she's in her 60s. She was like, this is the first time I had a safe place to live in 19 years. And so that always feels great. And then we've done 5 of the DIY clinics the last couple of years. For the direct buyer engagement, we have run 145 cyber patrols since 2016. So those are 2 hours every evening. Had over 15,000 individual engagements with over 7,500 unique buyers. So that's kind of the scale of what we're dealing with. Again, we do this twice a month and we do it for 2 hours. So 4 hours a month over the last 10 years, that's really what the numbers that we've come up with. And then on the law enforcement operations, we've been able to engage with 85 men at the point of arrest. So you're in handcuffs, you're going to jail, but before we take you down there, you talk to these guys, and we're going to try to enter into those conversations and engage with them. And then our online buyer course, we've enrolled 88 men since the beginning of January last year, and they pay to be in this course, which is awesome. And that money goes directly into our survivor services. And so those 88 men have generated almost $22,000 in revenue that goes directly to, healing the women that they've been exploited, which is awesome. And so jumping back into the journey, because I want to share kind of where they go and the exact things that we're able to offer through our resources and accountability. So now in Texas, I think there's now 4 states that have a felony law on the books. Texas was the first, so still vast minority of states that are able to focus on this at this level. So they are going to respond to sex ads on the internet, on an escort site, and they're going to say, oh, I'm just looking for a massage or whatever, when we all know they're lying. And so then they're arrested by local law enforcement. Like I said, after that arrest, after, Jarvis and his team have talked to them and gotten all the information that they need, then they'll say, hey, we have some volunteers here that want to talk to you. And so we will go in and engage with that man right there in the hotel room to focus on 2 things. So I mentioned earlier, education. Those normalized beliefs that they have, we have to provide the reality behind those things, because again, not to let them off the hook, because they are doing and saying and believing horrific things that exploit and hurt other people. But the reality is that they are willfully ignorant of the full truth of what's happening, of the full scope of the problem. They've convinced themselves, hey, you know, I asked her, are you independent? And she said, yes. You know, I didn't see a pen, all these things. So she must be here of her own free will. And so we're going to make sure that he leaves knowing that that's not true in the vast majority of cases. And so we'll ask him things like, have you know, have any of the girls that you've seen seem like they didn't want to be here? And, you know, almost to a man, all of them are going to kind of hang their heads and say, yeah, you know, I did. So we'll talk to them about them not wanting to be here. You know, cite the Melissa Farley study about how 95% of these women do not want to be doing this if they had any other choice. You know, they'll be like, oh, I'm not here buying kids, like, you know, and we'll be like, yeah, I give you the benefit of the doubt there, but you know, the majority of these women, you know, they were first exploited as minors. So we're going to share all those information, so that again, if, you know, when they're in handcuffs, it's probably less likely there's going to be an immediate urge for them to do again, but on the phone especially, we know that they can hang up with us and go right back to that website. And so we want them to, again, have that cognitive dissonance of, oh, all these things that I was telling myself are not necessarily true. And then we move into this kind of motivation and restoration phase where we want to understand actually what's driving them there. And again, this is where it becomes really clear if they are part of that 64% that wants out or not. But I'll just ask them like, hey, what did you come here for today? And I'm not law enforcement, you know, I'm not telling them what you're saying or anything. And again, the vast majority of them are going to default to something like, my wife and I have grown apart. I'm really lonely. I don't have, you know, people in my life. Very few of them will say something about, oh, I just wanted to have sex, because that's not what it is about at the core for the majority of these men. I'd love to follow that up with how do you feel, you know, after you do this, because the majority of them are, again, going to hang their heads and be like, feel ashamed and I feel guilty and I know I shouldn't be doing this. And so then we'll try to get into, you know, what is leading them there. And again, kind of a very stereotypical story that we see a lot is, you know, a man in his 50s or his 60s, kids are out of the house, he and his wife have grown apart over the years. And this, you know, started with pornography, then started telling his buddies at the bar, hey, you know, my wife and I haven't had sex in a while. And then somebody's going to send him this website. And that happens all the time. And then the last piece, again, I love being able to do these law enforcement operations because we're balancing this accountability from the criminal justice system, which is what it's there for, with long-term accountability with a volunteer and something that's actually going to get, again, the root of what he's doing. And so we want to move them to restoration, where they're not going to exploit people in the future. But then again, a lot of these men are married and have kids. And so how can we help stop this generationally by you being a present dad and husband that is actually going to not, you know, again, pass this down to your sons, but you're going to change this for them. And so we do have a whole list of resources that goes in their personal belongings bags. You know, when they get out of jail, they have this list that has, you know, hotline number that reaches me and all of these things. It has, you know, counseling, faith-based recovery groups, all sorts of resources on trafficking in general and pornography and things like that. And then we're going to take their phone number and their email. And 2 days after they get arrested, we'll reach out to everyone that we talk to, see how it's going, see if we can answer any questions, and then try to get them into our online course voluntarily, which isn't going super well yet, but we'll get there. So most of the time we're having to wait until probation sends them back to us. But at least if we've met them there and we see them in that hotel room and they recognize my face is the first video that pops up when they enroll in this course. And so our hope is they will remember, oh, that guy didn't shame me. He didn't, you know, call me a piece of dirt. He didn't talk down to me. He genuinely seemed to want better for me. And so when they pull up that course, our hope is that that would be the mindset that they would take into that, so that they actually take advantage of what's in there. And so I know these are really small. This is just a course overview that we have with our presenters. So we have a survivor, we have a clinical sex addiction therapist, we have law enforcement, and a former buyer and some other human trafficking experts. Here and so it focuses on harms to me, harms to others, and ways to change are our three kind of modules that we take people through. So we will start with, hey, here's all the things that happen to you. If you're a felon in the state of Texas, this is all the things that get taken away from you, all of those things, because, you know, some of those guys, they need to start there with what are the personal consequences to me. Then we'll move into harms for others. So they're going to hear from a survivor. She's going to talk directly to men and say, this is what I wish I could have told the men that exploited me while I was in there. It's obviously incredibly powerful for them to hear that. But she's also not going to leave them there. She's going to come back and say, hey, here is how you're hurting the people around you, but also this is the hope that's there. And so then we lead into a couple of sessions with a clinical sex addiction therapist who's going to say, hey, here's probably some things that you've experienced in your life. Again, we're not letting you off the hook, but you have to address these, and here are some practical ways that you can make that change. So 88 men in the last year and a half. Our ages at time of arrest were from 22 to 71. And then the self-reported ages in the survey at their first purchase were 18 to 66. So this is something that can pop up when you're a teenager or, after you're empty nester and retirement age. 48% are married, 20% current or former military, 41% have at least a bachelor's degree, 16% self-reported having paid for sex 10 plus times, and 70% of them found out how to do this on. These are just some zip codes from the sheriff's office of where they've arrested men on these things, and they're not going into Lipan to do this. These guys are coming to us, and that's a really cropped. There's like a couple of guys from different countries, so it's happening all over the Metroplex, and these are guys who are coming here into Tarrant County to buy sex when they were arrested. Some reasons that they gave, and these are in the surveys that we have them take before and after the course, is they need the money to help them by paying them for sex. So again, these are just the lies that these guys are telling themselves so that they can participate in this. Don't have to worry about a relationship, quick and easy way to get sex, that do things that other women won't do. And then these are post-course survey results. So we have, this really great research tool that was given to us by a researcher at the University of Northern Colorado to help track the changes in their behaviors and motivations, behaviors and attitudes towards these things. So 84% increase in understanding the harms of sex buying. So this is kind of, clumping a group of questions together. And basically beforehand, they were kind of, again, the guys will be guys attitude is the general pre-course response that we get. 70% increase in men understanding the victimization of many women in prostitution, 90% increase in recognition of harm done to a marriage by purchasing sex. And then it's not, we're still working on and taking this feedback and tweaking our content. So 11% still believe prostitution should be legalized. And two of our respondents strongly agreed that they would be okay if their son purchased sex. And so we're taking this feedback. We look at it quarterly, and we can, add and change videos that will help address what these guys are actually hearing. So last couple of things, these are some next steps and some quotes for these guys. So the second one is the one that stands out to me. I talked to this guy on the phone after this, but he confessed to his wife, her dad, which is just braver than I could ever be. His dad started marital counseling, got help at church, confessed all this stuff, and he has a great quote here in a second. These are, my goal was just completed, but I ended up learning a lot, and I was enlightened by the testimonies. Made me aware of the dark side of the industry, put a face and a feeling to the women, and let me understand what goes on with them physically, mentally, emotionally. It's not a mutually beneficial experience as many people think, and by that many buyers think. And then this is the guy who said that he confessed to his wife and father-in-law and all that, but showed me the ugly truth. I was holding secrets for years, and I'm relieved that I've been exposed. I hope to help other men struggling with secret sin. It's not a life that anyone should lead. So that's also a common refrain that we get. We had a guy in handcuffs at one of the last operations that I've been, and he said, finally, like, thank God, like literally he was in handcuffs. He said he'd been doing this for 7 years, had probably spent tens of thousands of dollars doing this. And he was like, thank God that I got caught, because there was no other way that I was gonna stop doing this. So I'll leave it there, and we got a little over 10 minutes for questions, but that's what we're doing. Yeah, Susan. Yep.
Any changes in the younger?
Not so much. So again, these are just the men who are enrolled in the course. And so we have 88, which isn't a huge sample size. I think the problem, and again, the sheriff's office will tell you, like, still 4 years on, almost none of these guys know that it's a state jail felony. So they get arrested and they think that they're going to get a ticket and get to go home that day. And so in terms of deterrence from the law itself, where I think we would see a lot of those changes, we're not seeing a ton of that yet. I will say, I think the main trend that has surprised me here versus a lot of my past interactions with buyers is these men skew a lot older than a lot of the ones that I talk to in our regular online civilian stuff. And I think there's, you know, time of day and things like that that play into that, but that's been the biggest surprise, I think, to me. Yeah.
Follow up to that question, do you have any legislation that's like it's in the state of Texas and these to have units?
Yeah, so she asked are there any legislative, you know, kind of priorities to increase deterrence? So since this passed, there hasn't been anything specific. Something that was proposed and it didn't get anywhere this year was an increase in fines and some more creative penalties where, so a lot of these guys, rightly, in my opinion, are, you know, if they don't have a prior criminal record or any, they're not repeat offenders, probation is what they're being given probation. And I think coupled with some sort of education, that is the right idea to help restore them long term. But that means that a lot of those fines and other penalties are coming down. And so two things that were talked about this year in Texas legislature session were some sort of mandatory education requirement if they plead guilty, and then increase fines that maybe are more creative ways to provide deterrence while still allowing them to, you know, plea down and get something like this. If that makes sense.
Is there any way, are you guys tracking in terms of demographics, those who best to be faith-based buyers of sex? And so are we like speaking churches about this?
Yeah, she asked if we know demographically how many of these buyers, you know, admit that they're faith-based or they have faith. I'll have to go look and see if the survey has that. I can tell you anecdotally that 75 to 80% of the guys that we talk to, we ask them that because we say, hey, they're a faith-based research. Are you something interested in that? The vast majority of men say yes. And so it's not you know, the programming is not overly faith-based or anything like that. Our conversation, it's like, hey, we're going to ask, are you interested in this? And then if you are, we're going to tell you, you know, if you're claiming this, then as a brother here, I'm going to come talk to you as a brother now. I love going to churches. So I have talked to youth groups. I have, you know, when I've been invited, I don't think that it is, a couple of churches in the area have been like, hey, we have recovery programs and we want to be a warm handoff. So we have two guys that were arrested in January that one of our volunteers actually took them to a recovery program. And they were met warmly. They've been going, you know, every week since February 1st. And some of our biggest successes there was this guy, you know, his wife was like, hey, you can't be at home anymore. He was like, yeah, I understand that. He had two boys, but through this recovery program and through our volunteers engaging with him, you know, his case was sentenced in July. He called us and was like, hey, can we sit down? I want to tell you everything that's been happening in my life. Through that program and through our volunteer who was calling him on a regular basis, checking in on him, he has been in intensive individual counseling. He went to couples counseling. He's in this faith-based recovery program. He's back living at home. He's like, I'm the best dad I've been in my life now. He called it the best worst thing that ever happened to me. But he said, I'm so grateful for it because without that I wouldn't be here. So, Tina.
I actually got a two-part question. One of the part is, I think over the different trainings and or classes, that they give to kind of have some of their sentences or charges lower down for a lower charge, whatever. And part one, does that come with later on and expunge them because a lot of that stuff kind of impedes them getting good jobs and or getting in those schools, even if they made a mistake and try to go and fix that. But once they got these classes and done all these things, is there an opportunity for their backgrounds to be expunged? That's one. And then
Let me stop you there first, Danielle. To you, that I don't know exactly the structure and a lot of that.
Also, and what we do have. I'm with the group. For my group, question. On full question, but related on what charge they would use you if it's planned to do it for probation, if it's missed. with all these mental illness, there's so many factors that go into it, so it's really hard. So there's other ways that can help them, you know, further on down the road. But there are some offices involved and they're who I would be working with that do qualify for. Some do not.
So the first question was, you know, based on these classes, I'm repeating for our online listeners, based on these classes, can these men get expungement down the road? Answer is it varies. Some of the charges would be eligible for that. Very succinctly. All right, question 2.
That I use and faith-based services. So that over the 76119-102, we actually have 548 registered sex offenders and pedophiles that are over there. Are they all the same circle as the like the trafficking? Is that kind of one thing?
That's another difficult question, Tina. So she asks, you know, registered sex offenders, is that a lot of the same? So first, solicitation of prostitution does not require you to register as a sex offender. So these men are not going to be, if they weren't already there, this is not going to cause them to be that. The men that, again, that we work with specifically, this is solicitation of prostitution for adults. And so I would say that there probably is kind of a divergent course there, because again, most of the men that are registered sex offenders, it's going to be, you know, contact with a minor or something like that. So I would say that the motivations and compulsions between someone who is, you know, preying on young kids intentionally and someone who is just participating in the commercial sex industry are actually different neurologically. So it's a good question. Yeah.
I love that you're using the fees that they have to pay to actually then support survivors.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if y'all are able to share maybe some of the stories with the men who do go through that and what their money is now being used for.
Yeah.
And because I just felt like that may appeal to the higher level of a man, you know, that
Yeah.
he's been investing the same kind of money and,
Yeah.
you know, using it for bad, but now, you know.
So she asked, you know, if we've been able to share stories of recovery and restoration of victims with the men who have paid for this course and their money going to that. And yes, we have. So we have men who have reached out and said, hey, after this, like, I would love to get involved. And my answer is first, awesome. 2, let's see you do some work. Let's like make sure that this is, you know, going to stick around. And so we have one buyer who I believe is going to share his story to some audience with us in the near future. But we do have men who have said, hey, how do I be a part of that? And I know that there are a couple of men who have been donated to the net or other organizations who have said, I learned about this. Again, I want to make restitution beyond what, you know, the $250 that I paid for this course. And so I've done other monetary things. The general contact, just to make it clear, is like when a guy registers for the course, they get an email that says, hey, take this seriously. Here's all the resources here. I'm a contact point. We would love to get you connected to a volunteer. You know, so one of our MASE volunteers would love to call you and check in on you and see how you're going and talk to you about what you're learning in this course. And we also encourage them to watch it with someone. And so if you're married, we say, watch this with your spouse. And I was like, well, we're going to get a 0% response rate for that. But it's been amazing how many guys have said, yes, I watch this with my wife, I watch this with my girlfriend. So I think that, so the response rate to, hey, get in touch with one of our volunteers has been pretty low. But anytime that does happen, you can tell it's like a genuine desire to, hey, I realize where I've been and I want to get better. And so at that point, a lot of our volunteers are able to share stories or more truths about, you know, what's happening in Fort Worth. Okay, last question, Lindy.
It's part of educating our young men, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. Do you have any programs you recommend for parents to watch, the programs they address this week?
Yeah, Shared Hope International has a lot of great resources for how to navigate a lot of this stuff. I will come talk to your kids. In terms of like specific, Fight the New Drugs, Brain Heart World documentary, I would say is a great starting place. I would have parents watch it first so that they feel comfortable with it's called Brain Heart World from Fight the New Drug. It's a 3-part documentary where they talk about the effects of porn on your brain, on your heart, and on the world. And it's a great, I think, table setting, and it has conversation guides and all sorts of stuff. So I would start with, especially in that age range, like the pornography resources, because that sets the table for, again, the escalation dynamic, how that gets out. But yeah, so feel free to shoot me an email if you have specific questions, and I would love to connect you with other resources that might help. All right, thank you all very much. You want to do this with that? You got it?
All right, thank you, Ty. All right, so as we wrap up, we want to give you guys a call to action. So what can you do after hearing all of that? We want to give you some action steps as you leave. Men that want to learn about the MASE program and women that want to learn about other programs that the net offers, you can attend their orientation training. That is on October 15th from noon to 1. Online. This is a QR code that takes you to the NET's website to get more information about all of their programs. And the orientation program is listed on there. If you want to arrange a group to have an educational presentation that Ty talked about, there is his email address. So there you go. 2 steps that you can take right now. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for staying the extra few minutes. We will see you all next month.